Chosen one, there is a particular kind of silence that belongs to the one who knows, not the silence of ignorance, not the blank, hollow quiet of someone with nothing to say. This is a different silence altogether, weighted, deliberate, and dangerous in the most elegant way possible. It is the silence of someone who has already seen the ending of a story that everyone else believes is still in its opening chapter. You know that silence. You have lived inside it. They looked at you and saw someone ordinary. Someone who didn't quite keep up, who seemed distracted in meetings, who nodded along without contributing much, who let others take the credit and the spotlight without so much as a flinch. They made their assumptions the way people always do, quickly, lazily, with the kind of casual certainty that comes from never being challenged. And because you never corrected them, those assumptions calcified into belief. You became, in their minds, the clueless one, the one who was always a step behind. The one they could talk around, plan around, work around without ever worrying about being seen through. That was your greatest advantage. There is an ancient wisdom in allowing people to underestimate you. It is not passivity, it is not weakness. It is strategy wearing the most convincing disguise in the world. The disguise of someone who simply doesn't know any better. Every great intelligence operation in history has depended on this principle. Every master negotiator understands it. Every truly powerful person has at some point discovered the extraordinary freedom that comes from being the most underestimated person in the room. You discovered it too. Maybe it happened by accident the first time. You stayed quiet when you could have spoken up. And because you stayed quiet, you heard things people would never have said in front of someone they considered a threat. Conversations unfolded around you with a startling candor. Plans were laid bare. True motives surfaced. Alliances were revealed. You sat there absorbing it all, saying nothing and understanding everything, and the realization dawned on you slowly, then all at once, like a light being turned on in a dark room. Being underestimated was not a cage, it was a vantage point. Think about what it actually means to be the chosen one in the truest sense. Not the Hollywood version, no lightning bolts, no glowing swords, no prophecy written on ancient parchment. The real version, the one that plays out in offices and living rooms and school hallways and family dinners. The chosen one is simply the person who chooses to see clearly when everyone around them has surrendered to comfortable illusions. They choose awareness over ego. They choose patience over the need for immediate recognition. They choose understanding over the desperate hunger to be understood. That is the real selection. Not by fate, but by will. You were doing this long before you had words for it. You noticed things, you always noticed things. The slight hesitation in someone's voice before they said something they didn't fully mean. The way a person's shoulders dropped when they received bad news they were pretending was good news. The almost imperceptible shift in the energy of a room when someone powerful walked in and every other person instantly recalibrated. You noticed the gap between what people said and what they meant. And that gap fascinated you, and you spent years quietly mapping it while everyone around you assumed you were just daydreaming. They called it being distracted. It was actually being observant. The ones who were loudest were also the ones most certain of their own version of events. They spoke confidently and often and with great conviction, and because conviction is often mistaken for accuracy, people believed them. They became the narrators of shared reality. They decided what had happened and why. Who was smart and who wasn't, what mattered and what didn't. And because you were quiet, you were assigned a minor role in the story they were telling. You were set dressing, background, the person who shows up but doesn't really figure into the plot. Let them write that version, you were writing your own. Your version had more information in it. That is the irony that would eventually become undeniable. While they performed certainty, you gathered knowledge. While they broadcast, you received. While they competed for the position of most obviously intelligent person in the room, you were doing the quiet, unglamorous, enormously powerful work of actually understanding what was happening. And understanding is the only currency that actually purchases anything real. There is a particular memory, you may have several like this, of a moment when the gap between what they thought you knew and what you actually knew became so vast, it was almost absurd. A conversation where they explained something to you slowly, carefully, with the gentle patience people reserve for children and the easily confused. And you let them. You nodded at the right moments. You asked a clarifying question or two, just enough to seem engaged but not enough to reveal the depth of your comprehension. And when they finished, satisfied with their own explanation, You said something simple and gracious and moved on. You could have corrected them. You could have demonstrated in about 30 seconds that you understood not only what they just explained, but the 3 layers of complexity beneath it that they hadn't touched. You could have, but you didn't. Because the moment you do that, the moment you reveal the full scope of what you know, you change the game. You stop being the person they talk freely around. You become a threat, a competitor, someone to be managed and outmaneuvered rather than overlooked. Overlooked was better. Overlooked was priceless. This is the thing about awareness that no one explains properly. It is not about accumulating information for its own sake. It is about timing. The most dangerous moment in the life of a person like you, someone who sees, who knows, who understands, is the temptation to reveal yourself too soon, to let the knowledge burst out of you because the pressure of containment becomes too great, because someone says something wrong in a meeting and every cell in your body wants to set the record straight, because someone takes credit for your idea and your blood goes cold with the injustice of it, because you are tired, bone tired, of playing the role of the one who doesn't quite get it. That moment of temptation is the test, and the chosen one passes it. Not by suppressing themselves permanently, not by consigning themselves to a lifetime of strategic invisibility, but by understanding that the reveal must come at the right moment, in the right way, to produce the right effect. The chess player who shows their strategy in move 3 loses to the chess player who conceals it until move 30. This is not complicated. It is the oldest principle of leverage in human history. But sitting inside the patience required to practice it, that is one of the hardest things a person can do. Because the world is constantly rewarding visibility. Every system we exist in, professional, social, academic, tells us that the way to win is to be seen. Raise your hand, speak up, self-promote, brand yourself, put your name on things, make noise so people know you exist and what you're worth. And there is truth in that. In certain arenas, visibility is the game and you must play it. But there is another arena, less acknowledged and far more consequential, where the opposite is true, where the person who is seen least controls the most, where the quiet accumulation of understanding translates directly into the ability to move when it matters and change outcomes when everyone else is still arguing about what's happening. You have lived in both arenas. You know the difference. The people who misread you were not stupid. That is important to acknowledge. They were operating on the information available to them, and the information available to them, the information you allowed to be available, pointed towards someone who was simply not a factor. They were not villains in this story, most of them. They were just people who made the mistake that almost everyone makes at some point. They confused surface with substance. They saw the still water and assumed it was shallow. They had no way of knowing that the deepest water is always the most still. Some of them, though, were operating with intent. Some of them saw the performance of unknowing and decided to take advantage of it. Decided to use your apparent cluelessness as an opportunity, to exclude you from conversations you should have been part of, to claim work that deserved your name, to position themselves by treating you as someone who could be safely ignored. Those people existed. You catalogued them too, with the same quiet precision you applied to everything else. You noted who they were and what they did, and you filed it away and said nothing, and watched them grow comfortable in the assumption that they had gotten away with something. They had not gotten away with anything. The account was simply still open. Here is what happens to a person who has been chronically underestimated over a long period of time and who has responded not with bitterness but with awareness. They become extraordinary at the long game. The short game, quick wins, fast impressions, immediate social victories, is for people who need external validation on a rapid cycle. The long game is for people who are deeply acquainted with their own value and therefore have no need to prove it constantly. They can wait, they can build, they can position, they can accumulate the kind of credibility that cannot be manufactured in a moment because it is built from years of actual substantive verifiable knowing. That is a kind of power that no one can take from you. And eventually, not all at once, but in accumulating moments, it becomes undeniable. There is always a moment, usually more than one, a problem that resists every confident prediction and obvious solution, and then you say something quietly, almost as if to yourself, and it cuts straight to the heart of it. A decision that everyone is gridlocked over, and you ask a question that reframes the entire situation in 6 words. A crisis that sends everyone into reactive chaos, and you are the still point at the center of it because you saw this coming months ago and you already know what comes next. In that moment, faces change. Rooms go quiet in a different way than they used to. People look at you differently, not with the casual overlooking of before, but with a new attention, slightly uncertain, recalibrating. That recalibration is not comfortable for them. It is a gift for you. You don't gloat, that is also important. The chosen one does not gloat, not because gloating is morally inferior, though it is, but because gloating is a form of need. It says, I need you to acknowledge that I was right. I need you to see me, and you have passed through needing that. You are on the other side of that hunger. What you feel in those moments of reveal is something quieter and more satisfying than triumph. It is simply alignment, the internal and the external finally matching, the truth of what you are becoming legible to the people who had misread you for so long. There is also something else in those moments, a kind of grief sometimes for what could have been different, for all the time spent concealed that might have been spent collaborating openly, for the energy that went into managing perception rather than simply creating freely. That grief is real and worth honoring. The path of the underestimated chosen one is not without its costs. There are things that were harder than they needed to be, opportunities that came later than they should have, recognition that was withheld by people who later scrambled to offer it once it became unavoidable. Those are real losses. They are not cancelled out by the eventual revelation, they coexist with it. But here is what is also true. Those years of concealment, however involuntary they began, produced something. They produced a quality of observation that cannot be taught in any other way. They produced a calibration of the gap between appearance and reality that gives you, permanently, the ability to see through surfaces. They produced patience that is now structural, not something you practice, but something you are. They produced a kind of confidence that is different from the loud, performative confidence of people who are always told they were brilliant. Your confidence was earned in a different way. It was earned by knowing things quietly for a long time and discovering that knowing things, truly knowing things, deeply and completely, is eventually its own vindication. They thought you were clueless. You were reading the room while they thought you'd left it. You were 3 moves ahead while they were congratulating themselves on move 1. You were building while they were talking about what should be built. And now, and this is the part that is difficult to communicate to someone who hasn't lived it, now you carry something that cannot be removed from you. The years of quiet watching produced a map of human behavior that is extraordinarily detailed. You understand why people do what they do. You understand how they rationalize, how they deceive themselves and others, how they perform, how they connect, where they are genuine and where they are constructed. You understand this not from theory, but from observation, long and sustained and meticulous. That map is yours. No one can update your software without your permission anymore. No one can install a false story about who you are because you have too precise a knowledge of who you are, built over years of forced interiority. That interiority was the gift hidden inside the indignity. The chosen one is not chosen by anyone else. That is the final and perhaps most important piece of this. There is no external authority who taps you on the shoulder and tells you that you were the one all along. The choosing is internal. It happened when you decided at some point, consciously or not, to pay attention, to keep paying attention even when it wasn't recognized or rewarded, to trust that what you saw was real even when no one else seemed to see it, to maintain the thread of your own understanding even in rooms and relationships that worked hard, intentionally or not, to make you doubt it. Every time you sat in a meeting where your ideas were dismissed and you quietly noted that they were good ideas and held on to them, every time you watched someone perform expertise you could see right through and you stayed silent but you knew, every time you were talked over, talked around, or simply not talked to, and you used that invisibility to see something you couldn't have seen from a more prominent position. Every one of those moments was a choosing, a small, private, repeated decision to stay true to your own perception. That is the real heroism of this story, and it is not glamorous, and no one gave you a medal for it. But you are here, knowing what you know, being what you have become. And the ones who thought they were watching a story about someone clueless have just realized they were in a completely different story the entire time. The kind where the quiet one knew everything. The kind where the overlooked one was always, inexorably, the one who mattered most. The kind that ends not with a dramatic reveal of hidden power, but with the gradual, undeniable, unignorable emergence of someone who was never who they seemed to be, not because they were hiding in shame, but because they were waiting in wisdom. That is you, that has always been you, and now everyone in the room can finally see what you have known for a very long time. The choice to write in the second person is not a stylistic accident. It is a calculated act of intimacy, and when it works, truly works, the way it does in this script, it does something that no other grammatical choice can replicate. It collapses the distance between the page and the person reading it. There is no narrator standing at a podium delivering wisdom from a safe remove. There is no character whose journey you observe from the outside, rooting for them the way you root for someone in a film, connected but ultimately separate. The second person eliminates that separation entirely. It reaches through the screen, through the page, through whatever medium carries it, and it points directly at the person receiving it and says, "This is about you, not someone like you, not a fictional version of you, you exactly as you are, right now, in this moment." That is an almost unreasonable amount of power to hand a piece of writing. The reason it so often fails in lesser hands is that second person requires the writer to know the reader better than the reader expects to be known. If the observations are too generic, the illusion shatters immediately. The reader thinks this could be about anyone, and the moment they think that, they have stepped back outside the experience and become a spectator again, which is precisely the position the second person was designed to abolish. Generic second person is actually more distancing than first or third person, because it promises intimacy and then fails to deliver it, and broken promises feel worse than no promise at all. What saves this script, what makes the second person not just functional but weaponized, is the specificity of its observations. It does not say you are special in vague, encouraging terms. It describes exact experiences, the particular silence of the person who already knows, the precise dynamic of sitting in a room and being explained something you understood more deeply than the explainer, the very specific temptation to reveal yourself too early, and the very specific discipline required to resist it. These are not broad human experiences. They are narrow ones belonging to a particular kind of person who has lived a particular kind of interior life. And when that person encounters them written out in the second person, the effect is not just recognition, it is the shock of recognition, the feeling of being seen so precisely that it becomes slightly disorienting. That disorientation is the goal, because disorientation cracks a person open just enough to receive something. The guard comes down, the analytical distance collapses, and in that unguarded moment, everything the script is saying lands not in the thinking mind but somewhere deeper, in the part of a person that knows things about themselves that they have never quite found language for. The second person gave this script that language, and then it handed it back to the reader as if they had always owned it. That is not just good writing. That is a kind of generosity that only the most precise and empathetic use of the craft can produce. Pacing is the invisible architecture of every piece of writing that has ever made someone feel something they did not expect to feel. You can have the most profound ideas in the world, the most carefully chosen words, the most emotionally resonant subject matter, and if the pacing is wrong, none of it lands. The reader moves through the piece without being moved by it. They finish and feel nothing has shifted. The words pass through them rather than into them. Pacing is the difference between those two experiences, and most writers never fully reckon with how completely it controls the emotional life of a piece. What this script understands, at a structural level that goes beyond craft into something closer to instinct, is that pacing is not about speed. That is the most common misunderstanding. People think fast pacing means exciting and slow pacing means boring, and they chase velocity because they are afraid of losing the reader's attention. But the reader's attention is not held by speed, it is held by variation, by the intelligent management of tension and release, acceleration and stillness, pressure and breathing room. The reader stays because the piece knows when to push and when to let go. And that rhythm produces something in the body, an actual physical experience of engagement that has nothing to do with how quickly the sentences move. This script earns its ending by making you wait for it in the right way. The opening moves with a kind of controlled intensity, establishing the world and the voice and the central premise with momentum that pulls the reader forward. Then, deliberately and without apology, it slows. It enters the section on grief, on cost, on the things that were harder than they needed to be, and the recognition that came later than it should have. That section does not accelerate through the difficult material to get back to the triumph faster. It stays there. It breathes inside the discomfort. It refuses to let the reader skip the weight of it in their hurry to reach the resolution. That refusal is everything. Because what the script is describing, the experience of being chronically underestimated, of carrying knowledge that nobody acknowledges, of living in a long and unglamorous middle, that experience is not fast, it is slow by definition. It is years of quiet accumulation, of patience that costs something real, of waiting without any guarantee that the waiting will be vindicated. If the pacing had rushed through that section, the reader who has actually lived that experience would have felt a subtle betrayal. They would have sensed that the script understood the surface of their story but not the weight of it. The slowness in the middle is not a stylistic choice. It is an act of honesty. It is the writing insisting on feeling what it is describing rather than just naming it. And then the final movement arrives. And because the reader has been held inside the slowness, inside the grief, inside the long patience of the middle, the emergence at the end does not feel like a narrative convenience. It feels earned in the most cellular way possible. The pacing made the reader wait the way the chosen one waited, and so the resolution the reader reaches at the end of the script is not just an idea they have encountered, it is something they have, in a compressed and distilled way, actually experienced. The form and the content became the same thing. The writing did not describe the journey, it was the journey. That is what separates pacing as a technical skill from pacing as a form of artistry. The technician knows how to vary sentence length and control information release. The artist uses those same tools to make the reader feel in real time the emotional truth of what the writing is about. This script does the second thing. It does not tell you that patience is hard and then move on. It makes you sit in the hard patience. It does not tell you the reveal is satisfying and then describe it. It builds the pressure over thousands of words so that when the release finally comes, the satisfaction is physiological, not intellectual. That is why the pacing is not a feature of this script. It is the script. Every word choice, every tonal shift, every moment of acceleration or stillness was in service of producing a specific emotional arc in a specific sequence at a specific intensity. Remove the pacing and you have a collection of true and interesting observations about underestimation and awareness. Keep it and you have an experience. The difference between those two things is the entire difference between writing that is admired and writing that is felt. This script was built to be felt, and the pacing is the reason it succeeds.